Welcome back everybody, DestinysJesus here. In this video we're going to be comparing whether or not performance mode is worth it compared to DX11, which I'm sure most of you guys are using. If you didn't know, in the most recent update, performance mode actually got a massive buff, and I think it's really good for competitive. So we're comparing how much FPS does it actually increase, how much input rate does it decrease, and also what are other benefits to using it, as well as some of the drawbacks that you need to think about when it comes to it. Most of you guys should know that a bunch of pros have actually been using performance mode and trying it out. A bunch of them have swapped back as well, but with this most recent update, it's kind of up in the air whether what is best for competitive and what is best for you guys watching this video, depending on your PC. So first things first, let's have a look at our actual specs on DX11. Just for a reference, I'm using the i7-8700K CPU and a 3090 GPU. So my PC setup is pretty good, and these are also the graphics that I'm using. High textures as recommended by Jarian, and then also epic view distance as well. Down here we're playing on DX11, we've got latency markers on. This is really important for figuring out your actual latency delay in the game and figure out your input delay. So you want to do latency delay on there, and then come over to this third tab, scroll down until you see latency debug stats, and whack those on as well. As you can see, just standing in Sweaty Sands in a custom game, our input delay is around 10 to 11 milliseconds. It really isn't too bad at all. Our ping is 1 just because I'm on the London servers and I live in Kent, so I'm actually really close to the servers if you guys didn't know that. And actually everything else is pretty standard. FPS is sitting around 200, 250 range on the max end, and it's not too bad, and I don't really have too much input delay at all. So these are the kind of performance benefits you're going to go ahead and get from performance mode. As you can see, my FPS has increased by about 30%, from around the 200 region up to averaging around 300 FPS, and also my input delay has decreased about 3 milliseconds down to 8 milliseconds total. That is a really drastic difference, and you'll definitely notice that in-game when it comes to in-game fights, mainly because of the fact that you're going to be finishing fights, taking balls a lot more, your edits are going to feel cleaner, overall it's going to feel a lot more smooth in your gameplay. Let's do some 1v1s in realistics with performance mode. Basically, the biggest thing with performance mode is the fact that the graphics are pretty horrendous. Like, beyond horrendous. This can be kind of an issue endgame. If you get used to it, and you also saw there at the end, another issue with performance mode is basically just the fact that people sometimes go opaque and like invisible, which is basically the worst thing that can happen. Is people go like somewhat opaque when they're on a cone or when they're in your box, and it makes it pretty much impossible to hit them. The main difference is basically the fact that the builds look completely different. Wood isn't the biggest thing, but if you get used to the build difference, I think the performance in terms of input delay and the ping reduction, it's not like a massive ping reduction, but it's definitely noticeable in terms of build placements and edit placements, or whenever you do an edit. It's definitely drastic enough to make a difference if you're on a lower end PC. And that's the thing, because the build placements are a lot harder to see through when you go for an edit. You need to 100% make sure you check and confirm where somebody is properly before you edit on them. Oh my god, bro. Okay, this setting is too good. Let me go try it in some solo arena next. Now let's actually go ahead and try out performance mode in arena. The biggest thing with arena is the fact obviously it's an in-game situation, all the texture and everything different, and you don't just want a mode that works in creative and gives you really low input delay. As you can see here, my input delay even in a real game is extremely low, and basically that means just my builds will place quicker, my edits will go through quicker, and it's actually a really nice addition to have when it comes to in-game. The biggest reason I made this video and just want to talk about performance mode a little bit more is the fact that they actually buffed it. So as you're gliding in, what would happen before is everything would just kind of show up as like a little grey blob, but now the items will render in a lot quicker as you're floating into here. I can see this grey tack from basically a mile away, and I can decide that I want to land on that. That is so important when it comes to end game and just understanding things like that. If you want to go onto a loot pile, whether or not it will render in properly is so important. So basically how you go ahead and enable this, I'll just quickly show it, is basically go into your settings, make sure your view distance is on epic. This will allow all the items from any distance away to spawn in, and instead of being like a white blob, it will just show the item perfectly. Obviously you can always go ahead and mark it to see and actually 100% confirm it, but that addition is really nice, and that's probably the biggest reason I'd recommend using performance mode if you are thinking about playing competitively. Oh, bro. Bro. I swear, when you take people's walls, it just feels like it instantly places. This guy just got his wall taken instant. Obviously that's the ping coming in useful, but that is mainly just from the fact that I'm using performance mode and it takes walls extremely quickly. He did not expect the dragons, bro. Nice. I don't think the visibility is that big of an issue. I'm seeing these people really clearly through all my builds, basically. Storm Edge also is pretty clear to see through in this. beaming, kids. One thing you need to make sure that you don't do whenever you use performance mode is to put on a thermal fish. As you can see here, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just being flashbanged like 50 times over. Not good. Do not eat a thermal fish. Now, our final review. What do we think of performance mode overall, and would I recommend it to you guys? I'm going to go ahead and say yes, every single person watching this video, if you want to do better at competitive, I would recommend putting on performance mode and getting used to it. Obviously, there's some drawbacks when it comes to visibility, especially when you're gliding in our spawn, but most of those have already been improved. And if you can get used to it, to play with it for about a week, you will notice a massive increase in how good your FPS is and how impactful that is in your gameplay late game, as well as just a massive reduction in your input delay that will help you get more consistent with your builds, your edits, hitting your shots. It's going to feel a lot more smooth when you're playing in game. So useful end game, so useful whenever you're in types of situations where there's a lot going on, maybe in a mid game fight, in a stacked game. It is going to make you play a lot better, so I'd recommend using it 100%. As always, if you want to check out me out over on Twitch, go follow me over on my Twitch, and also make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy this content.